Regardless of our political diversities and ideologies, Zimbabwe needs a dialogue. Some are celebrating, some are furious about the conundrum situation that we have, the sanction removal. Yes, 99.1% of sanctions were removed because they were now serving as a scapegoat to the current regime. Anyone who had an agenda of corruption would use sanctions to suffocate the people of Zimbabwe. Instead of fighting these sanctions, we need to come together with accountability, transparency, and find each other as a people of Zimbabwe. We advocate for social justice, economic freedom. It is not a country where 7.1 million people lives outside. It is not a country where your voice cannot be heard. It is not a country where people get abducted and the state does nothing. It is not a country where a citizen of Zimbabwe disappears and nothing happens. We need to find each other. Instead of fighting the sanctions, we need to show accountability and transparency. Us as Zimbabwe Economic Freedom Fighters Alliance, we celebrate for the removal of sanctions and the replacement with the targeted sanctions to the individuals that are violating human rights, corruption, because we save zero tolerance of corruption, zero tolerance to human rights violations. We advocate for social justice. We advocate for economic freedom. Every Zimbabwean has a right to assemble. Every Zimbabwe has a right to economic freedom. And this serves as a reminder to dialogue. Hanzi rumeri mwari kombichuru ende mwana ndiwe musha wese. Zimbabwe, we need to stand up for our rights, and our leaders need to sit down and map a way forward for Zimbabwe. We have been plunged into an economic crisis for far too long. Enough, it is enough. We have fought the economic crisis for far too long. We have fought the corruption crisis for far too long. We have fought the illegitimate crisis for far too long. It is time we say enough. It is time we find each other. It is time we have a dialogue, a meaningful dialogue that brings about a total change. We do not have a regime change agenda, but we have a system change agenda. The systems that are being used at the moment, they are suffocating the citizens of Zimbabwe. The system that is in place is suffocating the ordinary Zimbabweans. And it is time for change. It is time to find each other as Zimbabwean people. It is time to build our country. We cannot be a third world country in a 21st revolution time. It is not ideal to live in poverty with the abundance of minerals in Zimbabwe. We cannot celebrate the Mbingas in Zimbabwe whilst we can flourish in Zimbabwe as a country where everyone can have their own business, where everyone can work with their own hands, with their sweat, and achieve the fruits of their sweat. Hakuna chinhu chinorwadza sekugara munyika musiri mako. Hakuna chinhu chinorwadza sekudaidzwa nemazita akawanda munyika musiri mako. Enough, it is enough. The people of Zimbabwe, we save a reminder to the stakeholders of the previous elections to find each other, sit down and have a dialogue, a meaningful dialogue for the benefit of the Zimbabwean people and solve the crisis that we have, an illegitimate crisis, corruption crisis, and economic crisis. Without sitting down, Zimbabwe is bound to fail in economy. Zimbabwe is bound to be ungovernable. It will never move smooth. It will never be an ideal country for the ordinary Zimbabweans. We have to find each other. This is a reminder to the Zimbabwean people.